If nothing changes, I believe Chayula Monk will be the strongest Ascendancy of Path of Exile 2 0.3 patch. Chayula Monk will be receiving a number of changes in 0.3. The most notable of these changes is to Ravenous Doubts, which is now called Inner Turmoil. It no longer grants Mana Leech and instead now grants 1 volatility upon inflicting an elemental ailment and taking no damage from volatility. In case you don't know what volatility is, it is a buff that gives you 1% chaos damage per every 100 physical damage you take. This buff is normally extremely underwhelming, as there is a limit to how many times you can stack this before you will just simply die due to the physical damage you take. However, as we saw earlier, Chayula Monk can opt to take no damage from volatility. This means that as a Chayula Monk, you can stack this buff as much as the game lets you, which is 200 stacks. And no, this is not a joke. If you get 200 stacks, you are straight up tripling your DPS. Now the next question would be how to generate these volatility stacks. Thankfully, this YouTuber found multiple ways you could easily generate lots of volatility stacks. The method most realistic for Chayula Monk will be the Ember Fusillid and Mana Tempest method. Please watch that YouTuber's video in order to understand how the mechanics of this work, as I'm not the one who discovered these. Using this method, we easily generate 200 stacks of volatility, thus gaining 200% chaos damage. This buff lasts 10 seconds, which would make it only really practical to use in bossing situations. This is fine because there are a number of ways you can get these stacks in farming content, and realistically you will not need 200 stacks in order to clear that kind of content. If you want to practically stack volatility in farming content, there are 2 ways. The first method is baked into Chayula Monk's new passive, Unraveling, which now grants chaos damage from hits, also contributes to Ignite, Freeze, and Shock. If you recall from earlier, we now gain 1 volatility on elemental ailments, thus we can now just generate volatility by attacking things. The second method is by using the volatility support gem. This method requires you to invest in crit chance and most likely has to be socketed into your main skill gem. This is definitely the less preferred of the 2 methods, however it is a way to generate volatility. Now if you paid attention, you may have noticed that volatility takes 4 seconds to detonate. This means that while you're building up volatility, you will not be able to access your buff unless you wait 4 seconds. However, there is a bypass to this too, which is by using the Catharsis support gem. By socketing this into any skill that you use yourself, using that skill will detonate a random number of your volatility stacks, granting that as your buff. While you may not have full uptime on a huge volatility buff, you are able to consistently have it for whenever you need. Basically, what I'm trying to say is this isn't just a bossing gimmick, it'll work for the entire gameplay of Chayula Monk. The crazy thing is, volatility isn't all you're getting. They changed the way Flames of Chayula work in that Lucid Dreaming no longer provides any benefits, but now you can choose which Flames of Chayula you want. Here are what the Flames of Chayula do, and obviously the one we are looking for is purple. At the maximum rank of our Into the Breach, which by the way grants our Flames of Chayula, we will have 50% increased effect of our Flames of Chayula. You could also socket Dissipate and Interlude into your Into the Breach, which if my math isn't wrong, is almost 18% gain damage as extra chaos damage per stack of Flames of Chayula. Unfortunately, the purple Flames of Chayula run independently of each other, so we can't reach something absurd like almost 180% gain damage as chaos damage. However, you will be able to realistically maintain 3 to 4 stacks, which is a sizable damage buff. Do note that picking up these flames are quite annoying, and while you can socket in magnetism to make this a little easier, it is still quite annoying to have to pick these things up. But aside from little bits of inconvenience here and there, I think this Ascendancy is shaping up to become a monster. I wouldn't be surprised if before launch GGG decides to nerf some of these numbers, like the cap of how many stacks you can get, but if not, I think I know what I'm going to be playing on League launch.